Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here with my week 3 review of offensive line grades. Last week we kind of got away from the goal of these videos, and that's to bring focus to the Miami Dolphins offensive line. This week we're going to try to reel it back in and focus on the offensive line and not necessarily what other positions could do better. But I do think that we're starting to move the narrative of this offensive line and the idea that they are far from the biggest issue on this team. One thing I'd like to say is, you know, don't compare my grades to other grades. It's not going to be an apples to apples comparison. I grade on a very basic scale using 1 if the player executed their assignment at a satisfactory level or higher, and a 0 if they failed on that rep. And if there's some debate on how good or bad that execution was, then I'll go with partial credit and give them half a point for the play. This varies from other systems like PFF, where they're using a range of +2 to -2 and half-point increments everywhere in between. So a play that I consider as satisfactory, PFF may consider a -0.5 or a +0.5, and it factors into their grades differently than my grades. In my opinion, that grading system is tough to be consistent because you essentially have 9 different grades that you can give every player on every play. And without knowing the specific assignments and techniques coached inside those position rooms, I'm not sure how you can grade consistently with that fine of a comb. I don't always agree with PFF's grades, but I do respect their process. And I would say that my grading methodology has some roots from understanding how PFF's grading system worked in their early days. So I'm not saying not to use them. You can choose what grades you trust and don't trust. My main point here was that trying to use grades from different sources is rarely an accurate representation of either source. With that said, let's start talking about the Dolphins' offensive line this week. This is my first season doing the videos of these offensive line grades, but I've been doing the grading for about the past 3 years, and those grades are used in the formula for each of the new grades. So when we look at the average individual grades for about the past season of grades, it comes in around a 7.5. With that in mind, I can confidently say that the level of offensive line play that we've seen over the first 3 weeks of the 2024 season has been better than what we've seen in the past. And I know that the Chris Greer, you're more worried about it than we are, video clip has been bouncing around this week, but he's right. This offensive line build is working. It's better than it has been in the past. It's not perfect, but if you've watched the Chris Forrester clip that pretty clearly explains the vision for the offensive line in this system, you can begin to understand that this is probably where they wanted the offensive line to be for the most part, and it's a continued work in progress. The offensive line overall grade of 8.21 has actually come down slightly each of the first 3 weeks of the season, but they've had some different paths to the overall grade. In week 1, everyone graded pretty well and it was pretty steady. Week 3, we're going to have 3 players that graded really well, 2 players that graded fairly poor, and 1 coming in right around the average. I don't think it's going to come as any surprise that the lowest graded player for the week is Rob Jones, and this is actually the lowest grade of the season that I've given out. I'm not exactly sure what the issue is with Rob Jones. He came into this season with some fairly decent expectations, and I had those same expectations of him. He's been a pretty consistent player in the past. If I had to put my finger on it, I feel like the play calling and scheme really hasn't played to his strengths. We know that Rob Jones is not a great athlete. His change of direction is below average. And the inability of the offense to consistently be able to run outside zone where he can use his momentum to his advantage hasn't been as good as it has been in the past. And we'll see on some of the clips that we have here. I think that that's at least part of the reason that he hasn't performed up to the standard that we expected from him. All right, on this first one here for Rob Jones. This is going to be somewhat of a power play. So the idea here is that everybody on the front side here is blocking back, and then we're going to have a few guys pulling towards this play. So from Rob Jones' perspective, his goal here is to seal this nose tackle to the inside. And what we'll see happening here as we get Durham Smythe coming in motion is that when Rob Jones steps down, he's really getting off the ball pretty quickly, almost out of control. And that one step by that nose tackle is enough that Rob Jones basically misses this block completely. Still able to get the play off and get a decent gain, but that is more of Teron Armstead blocking his guy down far enough to catch Rob Jones' guy in the wash. And this has been kind of a consistent thing that I've noticed with Rob Jones is that he's really aggressive off the ball, but when that defender changes direction, he just doesn't have the change of direction skills to adjust with that. And that's where I had mentioned that, in a zone scheme, he's not really going to look to turn backwards like he does here. He would just continue towards the front side to the next guy, and the guy coming from his backside would pick that up. As we're getting into these gap schemes or, where it's more of a man scheme, then this stuff can be highlighted. And, this has been where he struggled more than once this season. All right, so got two more clips here for Rob Jones, and they're basically going to be the same thing. It's going to be a play action pass where Rob Jones is pulling to get to this defensive end, and he's going to get some help from the tight end. So on this first one, we can see Julian Hill is the tight end here, and you can see that this defensive end really doesn't get any wider than where he starts. And Rob Jones is able to do a solid job getting out there and getting on that defender. Now, as we move on to the next drive, and it's going to be the exact same concept, except for now it's Durham Smythe here, you can see this defensive end, when Smythe hits him, you can see how much he widens out. And then you can see Rob Jones is not able to adjust. So this goes back to the lack of athleticism from Rob Jones, that when there's a little bit of space created by the tight end widening that defensive end, now he's unable to change direction and he's not able to get to that defensive end and really slow him down much at all on his way to a sack. All right, back over to our grades. Our next lowest graded player might be a little bit of a surprise in Teron Armstead, coming in at a 6.36. This was really one of the worst performances I've seen from Armstead since he's been in Miami. Last week, he left the game with a shoulder injury, I believe a rotator cuff type injury, saying that he was unable to lift his arm. So I was kind of skeptical as to the level of performance that we'd get this week, because it's not a lack of mobility thing if you can't even lift your arm. He did end up leaving this game early again with a eye injury, is what was reported at game time. And then after the game, it was announced that he was in the concussion protocol. I'm not sure what exactly of those three things is the biggest issue with Armstead right now, but I would not be opposed at all to him taking a couple weeks off, hopefully getting right, and get to a scenario where we can have him for more than a game and a half at a time. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time watching Teron Armstead film, in large part because this just is not normal for him. But you can just see him getting knocked back and not being able to recover. And on the next play we have for him, it's basically going to be the same thing. He's getting out into a set and then not able to reset his anchor. Um, and that pressure forces Thompson out of the pocket. Again, this is not what we've come to expect out of Teron Armstead when he is healthy. So I don't expect this to be what we get out of him when he eventually gets back into the lineup, but still doesn't excuse him from a low grade for the snaps that he did play this week. So those are our two really bad grades, and our player that came in pretty close to average was Liam Eichenberg. Starting with this week, I did find a way that I felt I could incorporate the pre-snap penalties into the grades. So this 7.53 includes the false start by Liam Eichenberg. Um, Liam is never going to blow you out of the water and impress you as an offensive lineman. If Rob Jones had, played better than what Liam Eichenberg has, and Liam was your worst player on the offensive line, this would be a really good offensive line right now. As it stands, that hasn't been the way that it's panned out, but that's nothing against Liam. I feel like Liam continues to get a lot of flack for some of the stuff that he's done in the past, and some of his losses are very visible and bad. But when you look at Liam's entire body of work, I think that he is a decent option in this offense. All right, so here's what we're going to look at from Liam. This is actually a pretty fun play design in the sense that we've got Jackson blocking out. Ingold's going to come in and seal the end here. Everybody here is blocking down. And then Durham Smythe is going to go through and lead. But I want you to pay attention to Liam Eichenberg here and the way that he does a good job of helping Brewer on the combo block before he's then climbing to number 0. So as we're watching Liam here, he does a good job stepping down with Brewer. He stays on that combo block long enough to make sure that Brewer has that position and still gets off the block in time to get number 0. Now, had Durham Smythe continued through this hole and not gotten caught up with Liam in number 0 and gone immediately to number 20, this could have been a one-on-one with number 2 with nothing else between Achane and the end zone. So this is not a highlight type play for Liam Eichenberg, but just wanted to put this one in here because it's the type of play that Liam does consistently that kind of gets underappreciated, but then as soon as he makes a mistake, then that makes it all over social media. But Liam Eichenberg has been a solid performer for us this year, and I expect him to continue to do the same. Now we're going to get into the 3 players that graded really well this week. First one is going to be Austin Jackson coming in at a 9.2, and there seem to be a wide variety of opinions on Austin Jackson's performance this week. If you feel that he performed bad, I encourage you to go through the tape and to count how many bad reps you really feel that Austin Jackson had. Similar to Liam Eichenberg, when Austin Jackson loses a rep, sometimes it's, way more visible than some other players, and part of that is being out on the edge. But he had a solid week in pass protection this week, and as usual, the thing that really sets Austin Jackson apart is his ability in the run game to create movement. All right, so one of those plays in the run game where you see him create that kind of movement is what we're going to look at here. So Austin Jackson here at right tackle is going to block down on this defensive tackle, and basically, for a reference point, if Austin Jackson just moves this defender off of the logo, we'd probably consider that a pretty good block. And what you'll see here is that Austin Jackson's going to do way more than that. So he's not going to clear over to the hash mark. And yes, the defender does slant away a little bit, but a lot of times you'll see this defender able to anchor down and not just get washed down completely. But the upper body strength of Austin Jackson, you can see how he presses that defender all the way out of there. And, the impact on this play because of that, we don't get a great job by Rob Jones of getting around that block, and we don't get a ton of movement by Julian Hill here. But just the fact that everything on the first level there was completely cleared out just gives Achane that room to work and to find that seam. All right, our second highest graded player of this week is going to be Kendall Lamb, coming in a little ahead of Austin Jackson at a 9.32. Lamb had a pretty tough intro to the season last week, and part of that may have been that Patrick Paul took a large majority of the snaps at left tackle in the preseason. This week, Lamb came in and did very well. I do feel that the play calling, in some senses, protected him. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot. But in terms of my grading, I'm only going to grade them on what he's asked to do. And what he was asked to do this week, he did it very well. All right, so just a quick one on Kendall Lamb here. Like I said, he was just kind of solid with everything that he was asked to do. I really like this rep from him because we've talked earlier in this video about Rob Jones and his inability to adjust when he gets a little over aggressive. And here you kind of see the opposite of that in the sense that, Lamb's initial set here on this pass protection takes him across that defender, and he could have easily just lost contact and had that defender getting a free rush at Boyle. But instead, he does a good job of resetting his feet, getting back in front of that defender, and not giving up pressure on this play. All right, our highest grade of the week goes to Aaron Brewer. Shouldn't be as a huge surprise. A lot of people have talked about him this week. His 9.65 grade is about as high as you can get in my grading scale. He was near perfect this week. Didn't have much at all negative to say about him. He had a couple of snaps that I felt were kind of off target, but in terms of his blocking, he was superb, and he is fitting into this system exactly as I thought that he would. His ceiling is not where Connor Williams was, but he is a perfect fit for this offense. And this week he played a near perfect game. Okay, so taking a look at a few plays from Brewer here. We talked earlier about Rob Jones and his lack of ability to recover when his initial contact does not hit home. And we saw Kendall Lamb do a little better job of that. And on this one, we're going to see Aaron Brewer doing a really good job of that. You can see there that Brewer kind of overshoots his initial set with that defender slanting across his face, and Brewer is able to flip his hips and not only slow down that defender, but he's able to basically drive him completely out of the play. All right, on this next rep, we're going to see a really good pass pro rep from Brewer, and you can see that his initial pass set is really good. And this was a concern with Brewer when he came over from Tennessee. But what you'll see here is that, Brewer's low center of gravity makes it really tough for any kind of underneath move on him. So you see defenders will try to swim over him being a shorter center. And what Brewer does really well is as soon as they raise that arm and open up, that underneath the rib cage area, his feet just accelerate, and you can see him driving his defender all the way out and through the defender that Austin Jackson's blocking. And then last one we're going to look at for Brewer here, similar to when we talked about Austin Jackson earlier, you can see the way that when Brewer gets attached to his lineman, his feet continue to move, and he's able to widen that gap. We didn't get a great combo block on the backside with Lamb and Rob Jones here, but the fact that Brewer widens that lane by 1 or 2 yards, moving that defender allows Achane a little bit of extra space to work with, and he's able to turn this into a solid gain. Okay, so here's the grades all together for this week. Obviously, I'm sure there's going to be some agreements and some disagreements with it. If there's something you disagree with, then I absolutely encourage you to leave a comment below. Tell me why you disagree. Don't just tell me that Austin Jackson sucked, and when you're asked why, you say because I watched the game. Um, you know, put some work into it if you're going to disagree with me, and I'm always open to other opinions. And then what kind of offensive line video would this be if we didn't talk about Patrick Paul's one snap, and obviously not going to overreact to it. It's one play where he is blocking a defender that's pretty wide outside, not at the point of attack on this play, but if we can make a judgment on one play, then I would say that the one play that Patrick Paul played versus the Seahawks was certainly encouraging. When you look at the technique, you look at the hand placement of keeping those elbows tighter, things that he's talked about working on through the offseason. Um, Certainly wouldn't mind seeing more of him if Teron Armstead misses time. But for now, I guess we'll just have to enjoy the one regular season snap that Patrick Paul has had this season. All right, last one we're going to look at today is going to be a play that ended up in a sack. But what I want you to look at is every lineman is man on man here. And this linebacker is the one who makes the sack. And as you'll see here, that defender is unblocked, but everybody else is already accounting for somebody. Now, 48 drops out, but that's completely on the other side, which is why you have, it looks like Rob Jones isn't blocking anybody, but him and Lamb were working to those two. So this is a good example of where, the line can do everything right. And had zero not blitzed, you can see that even though Austin Jackson's off balance, he's able to, get a nice little shove on that defender to get him off balance as well. Liam's keeping his guy wide. This pocket is about as good as you can get, except for the fact that they bring a free rusher, and Skylar Thompson doesn't react to it at all. So I just wanted to include this one as an example, where the line can do everything right, and we can still end up with a sack at the end of the play. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's offensive line grades. We're going to continue to do these throughout the season. If you're looking for some additional Dolphins content, check out some of the other shows on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And if you're looking for more from me, you can check out the Scouting Combine on Thursday evenings with Hassan Patel, also on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.